Welcome to Puck Talk CS. Jonny Lazarus joins me today. If you don't know him from Morning Cup of Hockey on Daily Faceoff, if you don't know him from the Blue Crew podcast, if you don't know him from the Skate Around Laps for BR Open Ice, he's all over. He's everywhere. New York or nowhere, repping right now. Johnny, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for the intro, Maddie. Appreciate it, and hope all is well with you. I miss seeing you with the turtlenecks up in the press box. Always gave me a good laugh and anticipation, wondering what you were going to wear to a Ranger game. So miss you up there, but hope all is well.
No, all's great. I miss that too. And it's I feel like what's great is the internet. I feel like in the Ranger sphere, outside of the craziness this season so far, has been really great. I feel like everybody's really connected. But yeah, I miss seeing you too in the real world. But with that said, I know you've been everywhere talking about the Rangers because they are under that hot microscope. They are the center of attention in a lot of ways right now. And I was curious, you talked a lot with Vince on the New York Ice podcast last week, and that was before last night's victory against Vancouver. But you mentioned a few very key words that I think are being thrown around the team as a whole. And that's you mentioned fun, you mentioned execution, and you also mentioned body language, which I thought was a big one because I've noticed that too with Fox, Miller's, Vanjad. Of those three key words, which one do you think will help this team turn around the most?
Well, where my mind just went right now is fun. Um, it's interesting. Fun's a funny word, and I don't mean a pun there, but last year, one of my favorite career moments, I had asked Peter Laviolette and Paul Maurice prior to game one of the Eastern Conference Final last year, and it gave a really unique response, I think, from Paul Maurice, and I'll tell you what that was, obviously, but I had asked both coaches, how do you quantify pressure before the Eastern Conference Final? Because it feels like the pressure is to get to this point, right? Like you want to make it out of the first round. Like that's really where all the pressure is. You don't want to be a first round flop. And then, once you're in the Final Four of the NHL, like, do you still feel that pressure, or, what do you make of it at that point, I guess? And, Peter Laviolette said, can you get out of the first round? Can you make it to the 8? Then once you're in the 8, you make it to the 4. Like you don't really feel it, I guess, as it's happening. But you also know that it's there. And then Paul Maurice, and I know I'm kind of off topic, but it's just where my brain went. Paul Maurice, here's where it correlates to your question. Paul Maurice said at some point the fun has to take over. And when you're playing that well and things are flowing and all your habits are positive and you can feel it just throughout the entire lineup like that Florida team did last year, and even the Rangers did last year, that's when the fun takes over. So like the Rangers last year, something that I had said last week with the Winnipeg Jets, like every player says they go into every game thinking they're going to win, but not everyone truly feels it. Last year the Rangers felt it. This year I don't think they have that feeling, but I think they're working towards that. And it's funny, like the word fun, now that we're talking, like the last 2 games, 3 games, even if you want to count San Jose, they've started to look like they're having fun again. Like Capo Caco scores a big goal last night to make it 3-2, and his smile is lighting up the entire arena, right? Like he couldn't hold it in, and that's great to see. Zach Jones scores a goal in Seattle. Like he is having so much fun out there. I think even Mika last night when Kreider scored, you could see the fun coming back. And I think that's so important for this team to know what they're capable of, right? And then once they get to that point, that's when the fun takes over. And then we see the team that we saw last year. I think that's just where my brain went with that question.
Yeah, I think I noticed after the Zibanejad goal, which I guess was more universal of a thought than I realized, it looked like Zibanejad was more relieved that he scored than excited. And it's against San Jose.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I think he literally muttered under his breath, like, thank God.
Yeah. It looked like that you can sense the pressure. Like I'm now I'm not in the rink and I'm watching on TV, and it's like if you can feel that in your living room, then I'm sure you're seeing that every day. And I think part of that has to do with roster construction. I think last year I interviewed Greg Wyshynski, and he kind of talked about the DNA and makeup of this team. and I thought it was interesting because he mentioned how it's kind of like this is it. It's pretty cemented. But do you think that the team is almost too complacent? I know you kind of mentioned it with Vince, but I want to ask directly. Do you think that the players on this team are too complacent in their roles, like that they don't necessarily have to earn that every day at the rink?
Um, it's interesting. Like, I think you're referring to like the internal competition question that we had, right? Like
Yeah.
last year, there was so much to figure out. Whether Kako would be a first liner or Lafreniere could, you know, go against the bust allegations, playing with Panarin for the first time, Keandre Miller, like being a now a young veteran, Jonathan Quick, even like at his age, can he still play to the best of his ability? Philip Hedl was slotted as a second line center. Is he good enough to be a 2C, right? Like there are all these questions last year and questions that were answered in mostly a positive way, right? Like outside of Hedl, like Vinny Trocheck exceeded expectations. Lafreniere exceeded expectations. Kako was the one where it was tough, but I think he's come in understanding this year that like he probably won't get first line minutes, right? So like
Mhm.
I think you have to buy into the role that you're given, and it seems like the roles were already set in stone this year. And that's what I told Vince. Like the only roster spots that were really up for grabs were Edstrom and Zach Jones, right? Like that
Yeah.
fourth line left wing spot and the sixth defenseman spot. So I didn't think everyone that's in the lineup was like competing for, let's say, a higher spot in the lineup. Those were pretty much already set. And sometimes when you do know your role, like, listen, I never played in the NHL. Like, I'm not going to act like I did, but on other teams I played on, when I knew where I stood in the lineup, like you kind of lose that like little extra hunger. Um, and maybe that's just human nature, but I wouldn't say they're like complacent. But I think last year, just like from the hockey player mentality, it's like you're trying to prove something to a new coaching staff, right? So everyone's a little bit like chip on their shoulder. But this year, it's kind of like what your role is, and you just have to play that role to your best ability, and that's who you are for this team. So I don't know if complacent is the right word, but it's more so like I just knowing where you stand.
Mhm. Yeah, and with that, I think you and I disagreed actually a lot in person, but then online about Capo Caco. And I
Mm.
want to know kind of what your thoughts are now this season because I haven't had the chance to talk to you about it. The duo with Caco, Cooley, whatever center plays with them, but how those two have grown.
Well, with Kako specifically, I think the biggest thing for him, it's the first year of his career probably where he came in with not very high expectations, right? Like the buzz around Kako this year was like, will he be a good third liner? It wasn't like, will this guy put up 60 points? You know what I mean? So
Or
when
like
when you
his
do,
rookie year, 50 goals.
yeah, like when you lower the expectation and the noise around you kind of dies down a bit, I think it's easier to play freely, right? Like what does he have right now? Like 13 points, I think. What is it at? Let me pull it up. He's
Pull it up.
got He's got 11 points. So I'm giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But, um, with Kako, I think he's just taking a lot of pressure off himself. Like similar to Mika, when you talk to Capo Kako, like you can sense he's very hard on himself. And that was
Hmm.
something I gathered last year and even at training camp this year. But I haven't really caught up with him one-on-one since training camp. So I'm curious to hear how he's feeling right now. But he looks happy. He looks like he's thriving. And, him, Cooley, and Hedel and now Brodzinski have great chemistry. So I think he's playing pretty freely right now. And then as far as Cooley goes, like, I think we all saw it last year. He was a guy that did a little bit of everything, right? Like he was playing physical, throwing the body, could shoot the puck, make some plays. When the team needs a big play, Will Cooley stepped up and made some big plays last year, and he's doing that again this year. And, I think his confidence is just growing and growing as well because, last year, I think Will Cooley's role was like, if he can add offense, great, but that's not his job. And this year,
Hmm.
he's adding a little bit more of that offense. And now that's going to be an expectation because of last year, what went wrong for the Rangers. Like they lose games 4, 5, and 6 to Florida by 1 goal. And you're looking at that third line that could have been the difference to add a goal or two, right? To make it a different outcome. Because I think they only scored like 2 goals or 3 goals in the entire playoffs. So,
Hmm.
while Cooley is seeing a lot of success right now, the pressure will start to come as the games mean more because they're going to need this third line to produce and perform. if they're going to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, something I noticed, you had really great stories coming out of Winnipeg and their locker room. And I think, the Florida game stands out, the Winnipeg game, and this is off the top, but what's your thoughts on kind of the harvesting the points off those lower teams? I mean, it's early in the season, very early, but 62 games remaining. But at what point, I think with this road trip, this is a big litmus. And then I think, they come back, they play Jersey and Carolina, then Philly and Jersey. Um, and I think that kind of goes in line with what you were just saying about like Cooley, Kako, their production. Like when that when it matters more, when the pressure's on and you're up against teams that are better than you right now, where are you going to be at? So, I mean, how have you thought about, they're winning games against San Jose and Anaheim, but they're struggling against teams like the Jets. And you played the game at a higher level, and I know you talked a lot about kind of the X's and O's, but what do those teams do differently? You're watching hockey every night, covering morning cup of hockey. Like, what have you noticed about the Jets, Panthers, Devils? Like, is there something that they have that the Rangers are lacking right now?
I mean, specifically the Jets game, like I thought the Rangers played well enough to win. I just thought they beat themselves. Like I've said it, like, I really thought they beat themselves in that game. And I even like said that to Heedle, and I don't think he understood my question, but like the compete was there. It was really the execution that wasn't, right. Like, but I think in like the game like Florida, they couldn't even like find it in them to compete just because Florida took it all away from them. Like I don't think Winnipeg took anything away from the Rangers. I think the Rangers gave it to them. Where Florida, the Rangers couldn't generate anything because the Panthers obviously just smother you and they make life hell on you. And something that I emphasized on last night in the game against Vancouver was the F3 on the goal that Kiefer Sherwood scored, which I believe was Vancouver's second goal. It's very rare that you see the Florida Panthers cheating for offense. Like they understand that if they're structured defensively, that's going to lead to what creates their offense. Where the Rangers, I thought Riley Smith made a bit of a cheating play, wasn't really concerned as the F3, and then he gets beat up the ice, and Elias Pettersson makes a great play. Like I don't think Lindgren and Trouba could have played that any differently. And Vancouver, when you play a skilled team, they're going to make you pay, just like Winnipeg did against the Rangers. The Rangers made a lot of offensive errors, and they were cheating for offense, and Winnipeg made them pay. I think that's just what good teams can do. They can make your mistakes seem louder than they actually are. But, those two teams specifically, I thought Florida brought it to the Rangers. I thought the Rangers gave it to Winnipeg. So I'm not going to sit here and say, like, Winnipeg dominated the Rangers, but I'm also not going to take credit away from the Jets, And then was there another – you asked about the Devils, right? The Devils, like I got to be honest, I haven't watched, like, probably more than 4 complete games of the Devils. But from what I've seen, like, their team speed up and down the ice, obviously, I think is what separates them. Their defense is solid as well now. Adding guys like Brendan Dillon and Brett Pesce on the back end have made them a little bit more physical and a little scary to play against. But, it's the guys like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dawson Mercer. Like, they're probably going to outskate a team like the Rangers. Like, that's what's going to happen. And to slow that down, you have to clog up the middle and probably – I don't want to say like go to that 1-3-1 in the neutral zone that the Rangers do, but like that's probably what the Rangers will have to do to slow these guys down. So, it's going to be interesting the first time those two teams play because they haven't met yet. I don't think the Rangers and Devils, right? If I'm correct.
No, that's the first meeting's December 2nd.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, listen, the Rangers, their best win I think of the season was last night. Other than that, I don't think they beat Toronto 4-1 on the road, but I don't think they've really beaten a legit good team yet this year.
No, I agree 100%. Like Steve and I have argued tooth and claw about that Toronto game. I said that was so early. So yeah, I think that Vancouver game, you can see the turnaround. Like you said, Kreider's goal. You see some of the excitement. And on our latest episode, I also stated that like I thought it was going to be like a big goal that was going to click for those three, like just have an impact on the game, scoring a big moment. And I felt like, obviously I didn't play at any exceptional level, but in any time that me or a teammate or whatever struggled. What's up?
You've been around it at a high level.
I've been around. I've been
Well,
around.
you covered a national champion team.
Oh, true. No, 100%. I mean, it was the same way. And Quinnipiac was, kind of run like the Islanders, where it was a lot more like four lines, and they usually had the outlier of like maybe one elite player. So yeah, I think you can see like they lost. Actually, now that you mention it, Quinnipiac had lost up in Lake Placid in their conference tournament in double overtime, and they just couldn't get anything going. And that was the last game they played before they went to the regional tournament. So in Bridgeport. So I guess yeah, it's across the board. It's just something everybody knows. I think if you've been in the game or observed the game long enough. And with that, I think this is kind of a. I'm
Say,
curious to know your answer because I don't want this to be like one of those dramatic questions where it's like, oh, this or this.
I love dramatic
I
questions.
think.
What is it?
Listen, I think this is what I feel, but I want to ask you: is Filipino the X factor for the New York Rangers overall above everything else?
I don't think that's so dramatic. I think it's evident right now. Like he was their most consistent forward before he got hurt.
Hmm.
And last year, like Wenberg was fine, but Wenberg didn't add any offense. Like,
Hmm.
if Heedle's healthy, that could be an extra 4 or 5 goals that you need in the playoffs. Like, I think Filipino to me was like the best center on this team at getting the puck from the defensive zone through the neutral zone into the offensive zone. Like he did it consistently. And that's not
Hmm.
taking anything away from Trocheck, not taking anything away from Zapanja, not taking anything away from Carrick. But Filipino, when he got the puck in the D zone, he's taking it himself. And not many guys can do that in the NHL. And that was super impressive. But yeah, I think it's honestly, it's quite evident, I think, that he's the X factor of this team. Like, I don't even know who else you'd pick.
I feel like a lot of the discourse I've had with other people, whether it was guests we had on or just on the show or just like friends, is I think a lot of people immediately point to Igor, which is true. I feel like
But
X
he's the
Factor
best
though,
player. He's not, you can't,
yeah,
your
like
best
it's
player can't be an X factor.
okay,
Yeah. An
okay,
X factor to me is someone who, like, isn't necessarily the guy that's leaned on to be the difference maker, but can be a difference maker if needed.
yeah,
Like your best play. I mean, if we're talking about X factors, like, and what that means, like obviously then McDavid and all the best players would be the X factors, but like an X
yeah,
factor for Edmonton is like Zach Hyman, right? Like he's a guy who
yeah.
never in a million years would think could score 50 goals. And he does. You know what I mean? Like that's to me.
What would you say right now? Because I think this is the next guy I want to talk a little more about, but I want to pick your brain on in from your experience. But aside from that, down the road, kind of staying in right now is Zibanejad. I feel like is the other guy that people might say. I mean, right now there's a lot of negativity surrounding him, so I don't know if people would be saying that right this moment. But I always said on our podcast, and this is like I wish I could tattoo it on my forehead. I think that when Zibanejad's at his best, he somehow surpasses all of the other Rangers. Like when
No,
he's hot, right? He's dominant.
I don't think. Listen, I know recency bias is obviously a thing with Ranger fans, but 2 years ago, obviously Igor was playing out of his mind, but I think the narrative was like this team goes as Mika goes. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was a real conversation. Like in the playoffs in 2022, like he was lights out. Um, and I like I'm not going to disagree with that at all. I mean, I think obviously last year leading into this year, Panarin's been the guy. Um, but that's because Mika's also been down. Like if you have both of them playing up to that level, then this team's scary. But like you can't have one without the other. You need both guys to get to that next level. But I agree. Like when Mika's hot, like 2 years ago, we're saying he's like a top 10, top 5 center in the league. Like it's, that's why it's so frustrating, I think, because, it took so much time to actually put him in that conversation. And it feels like he's dropped out of that conversation way too easily.
I think what's also interesting is like I was listening to 32 Thoughts, they revived and Buskakis said, is that Buskakis, right? Kyle Buskakis is the
Uh,
new yeah,
Bukowskis?
he's usually like their
I know,
sideline
yeah, I
reporter
know Kyle is,
for
but I think it's Bukowskis, I think.
Bukowskis.
I think.
He mentioned that he had a conversation with Zibanejad in Ottawa before he was drafted about like how Zibanejad had this long conversation with his family about like, is this the career path he wants? But I think it's so interesting because you never hear that story come out in like pre-COVID 2020, like 5 goal game. You weren't hearing about like oh, Zibanejad, 5 years ago was thinking about maybe not even playing hockey at all. But it's weird that I shouldn't say weird. It's on point that it's coming out now, but it is crazy to think that I think when Zibanejad is at his best, he like somehow outshines Norris winner, Vesna winner, 100-point scorer, probably, Kreider, one of the Rangers now all time, I would say all time players.
Yeah, I mean,
Even
listen,
though
like, huh?
you're not a Kreider Rafters guy though, right?
Yeah, I am. I feel like I was like one of the
Yeah.
first ones to start that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was 2022 playoffs. I was like, is this guy going up or not? I asked Colin Stevenson that back in 2022.
So
And Colin said no at the time. Um,
yeah.
but but even with that, I don't really know how I feel about it. I want to say it's a for sure and it's a guarantee, but like I think there should be a higher standard to get your number retired. Like I really do think you
Yeah.
should win. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, like Henrik is a different story.
Yeah. Because he's a rock star.
Yeah, but like he's also like Hockey Hall of Fame. Like Kreider's not sniffing the Hockey Hall of Fame. You know?
Yeah. No, my brother and I go back and forth a lot because I argue, and not being critical of other teams, but you look at some of the jerseys and rafters and other organizations, and it's like, yeah, it's great that like he was great for your organization. And obviously, New York's very different, but still, like I think you got to be like one of one really to be up there. So I do think,
I
I
agree. Yeah,
think
I
the cup,
agree.
right? And lastly, this is what I wanted to know it from the player side of things. Because obviously you mentioned earlier, like we know, Johnny, weren't in the NHL, but you did play at a high level. And I wanted to know what you did to deal with the mental side of the game when you struggled. I mean, obviously it's your like it's just the way you dealt with it, maybe not everybody, but I think I want to provide a little more insight to our listeners for like what does Mika Zibanejad go through, right? Like when you're mentally struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speak for Mika, obviously, just because
Mhm.
we don't know. But
Yeah.
for me, like I was a total fucking disaster. Um, I was seeing a sports psychiatrist. I was doing it all to just try to get out of the funk. Like my junior year, I was like fully depressed. Called my parents, and this was like I had transitioned from UMass to Mercier, so like new school, had to redshirt. Wasn't really loving the game. Did not love going to the rink. The rink was actually like the last place I wanted to be, and that's hard. Like at UMass and earlier in my life, like I was one of the first guys on the ice for practice, one of the last guys off. I think at Mercier, I was like one of the last guys on, first guy off. Like I just like fully did not want to be there, and it's tough to get out of that. Like obviously in life, even when things are good, you feel like they're never gonna, you know, or when things are bad, you never think they're gonna be good again, and when things are good, you never think they're gonna go wrong.
Mhm.
And like full transparency, like I got nothing to hide. Like my junior year, New Year's Eve, left our team New Year's Eve party early, called my parents, fully crying, freaking out, like wanting to go home and quit hockey. Like I was just like, for whatever reason, I just like wasn't in a good mental place, and it affected not only my play on ice, but my life off of it. Like I wasn't really enjoying my social life and constantly beating myself up. Like I'd spend a Saturday night just like kind of staying in my apartment and not going out and enjoying myself. And, I think that's just how being competitive and how playing sports at a high level sometimes works. But it's never really easy to talk about, right? Like, even my roommates at Mercier like never really knew what I was going through until 2 years after we graduated. Like I told them like how much I like really hated it. But again, like I'm not like sitting here saying like I have any regrets. Like I'm very thankful that Mercier's took me in and like gave me a second chance and all that stuff. But when it comes to playing hockey and things aren't going your way on the ice, like it really just affects your everyday life off the rink. And
Mhm.
it's something that I feel like because players make a lot of money, they're told to just kind of put it to the side. I was pretty good at masking it. I feel like when I was around my teammates and no one would have known, but It's tough, and I feel like I'm rambling right now, but I think you have to love the game to perform, right? You have to, and that's why I think you're seeing it be more normalized now that players will take a leave of absence, like JT Miller just did yesterday.
Hmm.
Um, and no one really knows the reasons why, but I think it came out. It was like a mental reset, and sometimes those are important. Um, I'll never forget like when I just truly shifted the mentality my senior year of this is going to be my last year of playing hockey and like nothing really matters. Just like have fun with it. It's almost crazy to think about when you care less, you do better. Um, like I was just an idiot out there senior year. Like I would, chirp my goalies in practice, like just try to make myself have fun, trick my brain into thinking I'm having fun. And it worked. And I think that's something that, every athlete battles at some point. And, if I'm going through it, just talk about it as much as you can. And I don't know. I kind of got lost there. I haven't really talked about that era in a while, but yeah, it sucks. It's tough.
Johnny, well, man, I appreciate obviously how candid you were, and I didn't expect this morning to wake up and hear. So, obviously that's very personal. So I really appreciate that, and again, I think it just goes a long way to say like at the end of the day, we're all human, and I
Yeah.
think that's something that gets lost in the sauce, especially in the world of the fast pace kind of media coverage and expectation of athletes. And um, it's funny. Like I know this is a crazy connection, but I saw this meme that was like, people used to like go to games in their normal dress clothes because like they knew there were other things that were more important than the game. And I think at the end of the day that's different than the athlete. Like you've provided a phenomenal recount of something that occurs with many athletes and with you yourself. But yeah, it's funny. I think at the end of the day, when we're so invested, we don't realize that these athletes are people too, right? Like no matter what, aside from all the numbers, the one on the back of their jersey, the bank account, score sheet, it's at the end of the day, they're people. And we all operate the same in that respect. So I really appreciate that you opened up there, and I don't want to take any more of your time up. You're a busy guy, Johnny.
No, I'm happy to whatever time you need. I'm all good. But yeah, like I don't know. Like the fan thing is also interesting, right? Like we live in a cool time, but a horrible time. I feel like to be a fan.
Yeah.
It's cool that athletes can kind of like interact and respond, but it almost gives fans like I don't know what the right word would be, like an authority. When I don't know
A
if like fans,
microphone, maybe.
maybe yeah, like I mean,
Okay.
anyone can really talk shit to anybody they want at any given point, and like,
Hmm.
what does that really do? You know, but whatever. Like, it's a topic for another day. I feel like I love fans. I also hate fans. Like, I think
Hmm.
fans are obviously what makes this game what it is. Like, NHL players wouldn't want to be playing the NHL if it weren't for the fans.
Oh,
But
100%.
yeah, but at the same time, it's like, man, like it's they're doing their best. Like you know. But thank you, Maddie. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, Johnny. I mean, I also want to say before we wrap, like you brought me on board last year. We worked together for a few months, and I think like that experience I couldn't trade for the world. So, the first time we met was St. Patrick's Day 22 in the stands.
At the game, right?
Yeah, Avery introduced us. I was with his brother Jake, and like I think it's just crazy to think how a few years later, like we're already set on these, like paths to like our careers. So yeah, I think even from just keeping in touch, and you've acted as a mentor to me. So I always appreciate that, and it's great to have you on. I can't believe I didn't have you on last year.
Have I not been on the show before?
You were on like it might have been that summer, like summer 22. I think they like
Honestly, I
just
think
picked up
I've done it.
Trocheck.
Yeah.
So different times, man.
Yeah, well, F you. Next time, have me on.
Of course, man.
But thank you. I appreciate it, Matt. Excited to see your career skyrocket.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And of course, for our listeners, keep up with all of our socials. We've been posting a lot lately on Puck Talk, and keep up with us on our YouTube. We've been really pushing at that and plugging away. So thanks, Johnny, for coming on. And always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.